Hey, good morning. Here's a moment in white history. Have you ever wondered how we found out the proper amount of vitamins, nutrients, minerals, or calories we needed to consume in a day in order to survive? You can thank Dr. Lionel Bradley Pett, who found out exactly what it took to keep the human body alive by starving native children to death. The experiments were performed by the Department of Indian Affairs of Canada under the direction of two physicians. One, Dr. Percy Moore, the Indian Affairs Branch Superintendent of Medical Services, and Dr. Frederick Tisdale, a famed nutritionist and former president of the Canadian Pediatric Society. The First Nations nutrition experiments, as they were called, were a series of experiments run in Canada by the Department of Pensions and National Health, now known as Health Canada, in the 1940s and 50s. At the lowest estimates, these experiments were conducted on at least 1,300 indigenous people, with at least 1,000 of them being children. In these experiments, parents were not informed, nor was their consent given. In the 1940s, Canadian officials became aware that Native children in these residential schools were malnourished. So the Canadian government sent researchers to figure out why these indigenous children were malnourished. Meanwhile, this evil bastard wanted to know what the recommended intake for different vitamins and minerals should be. He saw the hunger and malnutrition at residential schools as an opportunity to figure out just what the human body needed to survive. So in 1947, he began conducting experiments on about 1,000 children in 6 residential schools across the country. Instead of giving these innocent children food to treat their malnutrition, he gave them supplements like riboflavin and thiamine to see if it would mitigate these problems. It did not. In another experiment, instead of giving these innocent children food to eat, he gave them pieces of enriched bread, thinking that that would improve their malnutrition. It did not. They became anemic and they died. Even though indigenous children were dying, they still continued these experiments. Most of these innocent children were so malnourished that their teeth would fall out, but they wouldn't take them to a dentist because they wanted to see the effects of malnutrition on gum health. Over 1,000 indigenous children were starved to death in these residential schools, and the experiments kept going. Why? Because they were already marginalized and vulnerable. Nobody was looking out for the best interest of these children. They had no voice and no one to advocate for their best interest. It's because of the starvation and deaths of innocent indigenous children that we now know exactly how many calories, vitamins, nutrients, and minerals the human body needs to stay alive. And that's how the deaths of indigenous children became today's moment in white history. Happy Indigenous Heritage Month.
So the fact that you're an immigrant speaks volumes. It means you chose to come here. But America didn't start that way for black people. They didn't immigrate here. They were living somewhere else, and they were kidnapped and raped and murdered and taken here. And so for you to just say this is a magnificent place that doesn't have racism is actually, I think, more of a foundational lie than anything else. Yeah. Would your argument be that you don't believe that that's purposeful or that it doesn't exist?
I don't believe it exists.
Okay.
I don't know what these systems are.
Okay, so
give me one system.
All right, redlining neighborhoods.
Capitalism?
No, redlining neighborhoods.
That was a state-enforced thing from Jim Crow, which is the one point at which I think absolutely is true.
So you just said it doesn't exist except for that.
No.
Yeah.
No, I said white supremacy doesn't exist.
But, so when the New Deal was passed, right? When the New Deal was passed, black people were explicitly not allowed to have those loans. When the Homestead Act allowed white people to get an enormous wealth of land and be able to farm it, black people did not have access to that. When slaves were freed, when Social Security came, black people, when the GI Bill, black people were not. So when you say to me, I don't get how this exists, I'm just having trouble figuring out, like, I mean, you're a bright guy. Like, what the f are you talking about?
Washington Carver was never around black folks till he went to Tuskegee. His mother and father died or was killed, and a white family adopted him from Iowa. You know, black folks in Iowa, except football players. So he went to grade school, high school, and they didn't have no segregated schools. They didn't have enough people. And so now George Washington Carver leaves after he get all his education come out there. He goes to Tuskegee. Henry Ford came down to visit, like he always see his friend. And he said, Mr. Ford, I got something here. Study plants. And so if you take this back and give it to your engineers, they can build more than one car at a time. He took it back. Mass production all over the world is called the plant, right?
Everybody made joke of him because they said, well, you know, but the plants are talking to him. You know, is this how he's getting these properties of these plants? And George Washington Carver, in his quiet, dignified way, said, well, who taught me? I'm not saying that they talk to me like they got a tongue, but I can look at a plant and see what it can do for the human family.
The military came to George Washington Carver, and they said, we need you to do something for us. Can you invent something that out of it we can get paint, glue, ink, and plastic? Yeah, I can handle that. They tell me how smart black folk are. I can handle it. So he came back, called soybean. Now you want to hear something funny? The #1 cancer group in America is vegetarians. Because you wasn't supposed to eat soy. When he got to Tuskegee, they thought he was gay. No association with women, high-pitched voice, they thought he was gay.
The finest use we've been able to make of peanuts is in the treatment of the after effects of infantile paralysis.
And he'd rather for you to believe he was gay than tell you that them white folks that adopted him castrated him so he couldn't have sex with their daughter. Like, who wanted them? Huh?
And as always, Yahweh, all day, every day. Peace.
On this week's episode of White People Being Shocked by Animals in Their Natural Habitat, Robinson Island, Alabama. Yes, those are hammerheads, and people are absolutely flabbergasted. If you're unfamiliar with Robinson Island, it's located right in the heart of Orange Beach, Alabama. Every single day you can go to this island and witness a plethora of white people wading balls deep in crystal clear emerald-colored water next to their boats. I'll be honest with you, I've never understood people going to a large body of water and then being shocked to find animals that reside in that large body of water. That is literally the equivalent of me going over to Robbie's trailer and then being shocked to find him sitting on his couch in his boxers eating flaming hot Cheetos, drinking Busch lattes, and watching reruns of Gunsmoke. I'm telling you, at this point, I'm convinced that I should do a 23andMe. Why, you ask? Because you're not going to see my white ass out there in that water. I'm white, but I'm not that white. See, me and sharks, we have an agreement. I'm not going to go in their water and they're going to stay out of my bathtub. I've said it once and I'll say it again. It's a damn wonder white people ain't extinct. Hell, it's a wonder I'm here.